I have a very special feeling this moment. When I was sitting down there, I was wondering how it is like to be up here. Now I'm up here, I like it actually. You know, my problem is when I get a little tense, my throat dries up. So I got a glass of water. So half left. So I hope that I don't use it up. I come to this meeting with a special feeling for Dr. Marshall Parks and Dr. David Kogan. In 1978, I arrived here to be trained by Dr. Parks as a fellow. And during the fellowship, you have certain assignments. One of them is you organize journal club. Often Dr. Parks and fellow will screw up early in the morning, and during that time, he often will question what is new and then what kind of a journal article have you read is what he's asking. And I get a little tense when it's so silent for a long time, you know. So one day I asked him, what was the biggest break you ever had? To preempt his question. He said, he paused a while and he said, survival, and I didn't quite get it. After that, I learned that he told that to David Steger in Dallas. Several of the fellows heard the same thing at different times. So I didn't get it. So I said, you have to explain to me. He didn't have time to explain, but we'll find out during this talk what he meant, survival. And then as we walk into OR, he often will talk to himself. He says, after all, we are all mortal beings. And that's what that last 5 minutes of scrubbing is like. Now, today I noticed that if you saw me turning my head around, I was trying to check if any one of you were falling asleep, and none did. It was quite impressive. You have this very amazing stamina. This is Saturday afternoon, you know. So with that, we'll get started here. It's not moving. There we go. He had childhood influences and educational influences and military and professional. We'll go through each step. Childhood influences. I studied my own teacher as if you're studying a patient. There's genetic background, heritage, chromosomes, and then there's environment. So we'll look at both. Last 30 plus years, I've tracked his roots. This is where his grandmother met the grandpa, great-grandpa. Jane Marshall, grandmother, met the grandpa there. If she said no, then I won't be trained here for sure. This is his grandfather on the maternal side, John Marshall Miller. Amazing story about him is those days the railroad was not didn't exist, so he drove cattle for several years. After that, he finished 8th grade and taught school. Following that, he went to University of Michigan Law School, so he's a lawyer. And this is where the whole story begins. Old Mission, Michigan is a finger-like projection near Traverse City, Michigan. And this is the town itself. Town consists of, that's where he was born. There's a lighthouse, which is halfway between North Pole and equator at 45 degrees. And gas station and 2 other houses. That's the whole town. And Dr. Parks' birthplace would have been Third House, which does not exist. And thank you, Dr. Spivey, for the loan of this picture. When I went there, the house did not exist. This is the birthplace. And from there, first move was to Iowa, western part, Ida Grove, where Grandpa owned some land. And this was Depression years, so he went on to almost every couple of years they had to move on. This is how Charter Oak looked like. That was his early memory period. This is where he started first grade. From there, again, because of Depression, the land was taken over by the bank. So they moved to Chicago, where he lived in an apartment complex, and that's where his brother, and this is Dr. Parks at that young age. His brother died in the same bed in Chicago when both Dr. Parks and his brother, twin brother, had diphtheria. The one died, and the doctor said, not only this boy died, the parents are grieving. He points to Dr. Parks and said, this boy also will have to go. So he will die within a matter of hours or days. He told me that that really struck him in the brainstem. So after that, he survived. He beat many odds. So he went on to, this is a junior high school in Mattoon. Every so many years he has to move. This is where he went to high school in Jacksonville. I had a great fortune. I had fellowship here. As I stand here, I was wondering, how did I end up here? Well, I have no real reason, but series of luck. One, Dr. Parks Fellowship. Two, I went to Central Illinois, where he grew up. And so I'm tracking his roots. Well, if I went to New York City, it won't happen either. So not only I went to Central Illinois, but one of the staff who works in my office came from an area very close to Jacksonville. In fact, her son goes to Illinois College, where Dr. Parks went to the same college. So life works very strangely. And a series of luck led me to give you this talk. So here, he went to high school, and they had some financial issues. They were still played football in high school. He worked as a caddy. His fee was 25 cents, and he told everybody that sometimes tips. So he made some high school money at the golf course. And then that town has one coeducational college, which is Illinois College, and McMurray College in Jacksonville, the two schools in a small town. It's a good thing there was college, so he went on to Illinois College. He played football in college. Here he met Dr. DeReich. He's a biology professor who is Dr. Parks' mentor. The educational influences, he wanted to go to medical school, but didn't have money for it. So he applied to two schools in St. Louis University and Washington University, and St. Louis University accepted him first. So he sent in his only $50 for matriculation. And shortly thereafter, he received admission to WashU, where he actually wanted to go. So he didn't have second $50, so that's the life. So he went on to St. Louis University. It turned out just fine for him. He met his future bride. And during the medical school years, he worked on cruise ship. It's Chicago, Duluth, and the Georgian Bay Company that works more like today's cruise ship. So here he is, right in the middle. Then summer work was enough to send himself to school, college, medical school. But last year, the war broke out, World War II. He didn't have summer because they shortened to 9 months, and immediately after third year, the fourth year started. So he didn't have money for it, but his the father's employer gave the money for last year's tuition, for which he forever remembered. And then he went on to military duty interned in San Diego Naval Hospital. Chuck Like was a procurement officer in St. Louis. He whispered to Dr. Parks that if you want to do a smart thing, you go into ophthalmology. Because there's surgery, there's neurology, there's internal medicine. Besides, you can make living selling glasses. So he went on, he wanted to study that specialty. So during the war, he was assigned to many ships. This Johnston is where he wanted to go. That's a new ship. So they literally drew straw between two medical doctors who happened to come from St. Louis. Dr. Brown, who drew the longer one, ended up in the better ship, and Dr. Parks went on to the World War I refurbished Montgomery. But it ends up, the ship that Dr. Brown was on sank in Philippines with a Japanese attack. There's very few survivors on that ship, and Dr. Brown died. Dr. Parks was assigned to subsequently 3 different ships, as he's more like a puddle jumper. As soon as he jumps off, something happens to that ship. So there are 3 ships damaged or sunk. So after the war, he came back to Midwest, this Great Lakes Naval Base north of Chicago. And that's when, now he got discharged in 1947. That's when he wanted to take care of children. He noticed that there's no children's eye care, and he complained. And others feel like that. Why don't you take care of all the kids? So he did. And then he learned through Dr. Perry Ross that there's somebody in Washington who's already doing that full time. So he called up Dr. Frank Kassenbader, and he accepted as his first trainee. At that time, it was not a fellowship, they called a preceptorship. So he has many different influences. Obviously, he comes from good stock of chromosomes and educational background. Sometimes he's the man. I think adversities can be turned around for the better. So I am, these are the references. Now you're going to hear him talk. I'll be quiet. Loud, please.
Brother and I worked the same day, and he died of this bacteria. And I recall very well this doctor wanting to give us a shot of antitoxin. And my parents were, of course, grieving because they're my brother who just died lying next to me dead. And I heard him say to my parents, well, I'm sure that he pointed to me and I will be dead in the next few hours, the same disorder. And that recall troubled me very much. But I think that had a certain bearing on my life in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. So I would start there with somewhat of an explanation as to what did these faculties in my life.
Continue on to the next one. The next portion of the movie, please.
And I could see the great deficiency in ophthalmology, which was primarily a geriatric specialty, who made the result that, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to really see that pediatric ophthalmology is developed in this country.
I drank up. When I get a little nervous, I drink a lot of water, so it's empty.
You sure?
No.
Oh, good.
See, I was watching my teacher. This morning, there's a best slide I've seen is those 2 picked slides of the day, early in the morning. So we tracked up the river, we dug up the roots, and lifted some rocks. I think Dr. Parks is the man who jumped stone to stone. He didn't fall off, and he lived a very full life every day, every hour. Thank you.
Anyone want to comment on this? Bruce.
You might know that he did have his preceptorship with Frank Costenbader, but he never had a residency.
Right.
And Marshall was the last ophthalmologist who was a member of the American Board of Ophthalmology, and in fact is chairman, without ever having an ophthalmology residency.
Thank you. Great Lakes did eye assignment. There was not eye, ENT. That's where, this is another example of continuous education, self-education. He took one course. That was Dr. Derek Vale's Northwestern Basic Science course for 3 months. That was it. After that, if you ever go to Maine to his summer home, from 10 o'clock to about 11:30, you cannot touch him because he's going to read journals. So he's a man who learned every day.
I just wanted to comment. I had a fellowship with Costenbader Parks in '68, and it's been my pleasure recently. We have 2 of his grandchildren at Wills to explain the 3-step test to his grandchildren.